Now we are live. It's definitely slightly quicker than just going live into Facebook from Zoom. So hello everybody. Happy Monday or Sunday, depending on where you are in the world. I don't think there's anyone on Tuesday, so I think I can be safe with saying those things. Welcome to another episode, I suppose, of How To with Ellie and Erin. These are conversations that we think are really important to be having, and would love for them to serve you, and hope that you are enjoyed last week's one where we talked about the mental load. If you haven't watched it, definitely recommend checking it out. And today we're going to talk about how to claim your sovereignty and stand in your power. So this is something that has come up for us a number of times in a number of areas, and we thought it would just be really worth having the conversation in the hope that it resonates with some people watching and helps them. So Erin, sovereignty, what does that mean?
Oh, it's a big word, right? Like there's a lot to it, I think. And it can be really uncomfortable as well, I think, because we, certainly those of us who come from a sort of a colonial or English background, the concept of sovereignty is about almost being above others. But I don't think that that's the truth in terms of what the word should mean. I think sovereignty for me is much more about claiming who you are and who you're here to be, and being able to stand on that pillar rather than it being about anyone else. So when we talk about sovereignty in society, often that references someone being above other people in society, but I don't think it's about that for us. I think it's about knowing what our authentic truth is and being able to stand really firmly on that. And that is a completely independent process of anyone else, as long as we maintain our own sovereignty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I for me, it's definitely about claiming that who we really are, who we are on the inside. And often that can feel quite challenging because we've been told by heaps of people throughout our whole lives that actually we've got to fit into a certain box. And when we start to tune in and start to connect with who we really are, it's like, well, I don't know if I fit in this box anymore, but if I don't fit in this box, where do I fit? And how do I contribute? Because it can really, I really found when I was sort of on this, awakening self-development journey, I found it really challenging to know where my place was in the world. When I started to not be comfortable and happy with what I'd had before, it sort of created this real sense of unease as to like what was my role. And I'm not going to lie, it still crops up even now when we have these sorts of deep conversations about what is our role and what are we here to do. It's a bit like, well, actually, how does that really look? How does that really feel? And it can feel incredibly what's the best word? It can feel really challenging when you're first in that space. And I know that I'm very grateful to have a business partner and friends such as you who can help me with this, because actually when you are sort of exploring who you really are, what your sovereignty is, it can feel quite lonely. So having space to explore it that's safe, and you can actually question stuff and really challenge it. And I think one of the experiences that I would really like to just share with the audience in terms of understanding that who we are inside, I think it's more than just who we are, but it's how our views, how we exist in the world. And I certainly know that from, we talk about British colonialism. Well, I'm, British, as everyone can tell from my accent. I grew up very much in that world, and my views and my opinions were very fitted in alignment with society. They were very much what I'd been brought up with, in the the way that I lived with my family, and all of those things. And some of the experiences and some of the views I had in my teens, in my 20s, and probably even in my 30s, I look back now and I'm so glad that I'm in a position to challenge them and question them and really explore what's actually right for me. But having a space to do that has been really important. So I think when we talk about claiming your sovereignty, it is about being able to step into who you really are and what you're meant to be. But it's also being able to be willing to just actually unpick all of the things that have kind of created the box that you live in and decide what is it that you actually want to believe. And it can be deeply uncomfortable when you do that work, because there's a whole load of things that you have thought that suddenly don't feel very nice to think anymore.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of people would perhaps consider that claiming your sovereignty is about finding your purpose. And, we've had great conversations in the past about purpose and whether having a purpose is something that we should be motivated for, or that it's something that we should be able to identify for ourselves. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on us if we think that we have a singular purpose when we come to this lifetime. What does it say about it if we can't find that, if we can't identify that, or if we don't feel strongly about something? And so I think part of that is about accepting that actually, as spiritual beings having a human experience, incarnating as we are when we do, I think actually it's about really saying that we don't have to have a purpose, one specific purpose, but that we are here to live a purposeful life. And that every day we're supposed to come with authenticity and honor our own truth and lead with love, and be purposeful in what we're doing here. And I think that is how we claim our sovereignty. When we come to it and we understand who we are at a really, really deep level, that self-mastery process of understanding who we are, I think that requires us to then go on and do some healing work, right? Because we're not going to like everything that comes up, and we're not going to own everything that comes up. And a lot of the time we don't own a great portion of it. Like you were saying, you grow up in societies that shape you to be particular ways because that's the expectation. And we have to learn how to shed those skins and heal the wounds that are left behind. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you really sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of like what stops us from claiming our sovereignty. And it really does come from what we've been told, what we've been, what we've just been told we should believe, and what is, the grown-ups have told us, and we should follow the grown-ups. And I think it's, not only is it challenging for us who are willing to like explore and uncover it and dive into, what things mean for us and what things mean for the society that we live in, and all of the impacts around that. But it's also really uncomfortable for the people who have perhaps done what they've been told by society in the past, who have followed the rules, who have been, they've been in the lower position, so to speak. They've had the grown-ups telling them how to behave, and now suddenly they've got to the stage of being the grown-ups, and everyone underneath them's gone, well, actually, we kind of don't agree with all of this, so we're going to do it our way. I mean, that must be so depressing to get there and be like, yes, finally got the power, and everyone's like, that power, we've kind of totally taken it elsewhere. We've decided that actually we want to do things differently. And I think that's really interesting when we're dealing with different generations, and certainly, having an older generation, having parents, and then having children, and being sort of in the middle, trying to work out how I fit into it, and how what I believe fits into it, and then how that helps my children to be able to make decisions. Matt and I were chatting last night. We were talking about the whole concept of being gender queer, and this is something that if I spoke to my parents about, they'd be willing to explore it and listen to it. I'm not sure Dad would get it, but he would be totally willing to listen to it, but I don't know how he would be able to actually action it. Whereas when I was talking with Matt, I said, this is going to be the norm for Emily. This is going to be just she's going to have friends. She may well be, that might be her choice as well. And we have to be able to support that and navigate our way through it. And I think the difference now is that we're so willing to do that work, to try and understand it, and to hold our hands up and say, actually, I don't necessarily have all the answers. I don't know how it feels. And sometimes I actually don't know what to say. But it's being able to explore it in a space that allows you to ask these questions without judgment of yourself, and also with people that you can ask the questions to and not feel judged. And that's in every aspect of our lives. And I really believe that if we're going to claim our sovereignty, we have to be willing to look at all aspects. And probably the things that make us feel most uncomfortable are the things we need to explore the most, because that is going to give us the most amount of power back when we're actually able to know where we truly stand on a subject, rather than just being kind of, thinking that what we've always thought before. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think. So I think if I've followed your thinking correctly, I guess for me, when we talk about power and we look at the society that our parents inherited, and then the society that we've inherited from them. I think the major difference for me is that we recognize that the assignment of power historically hasn't served the collective. It's served those with the power. And actually now what we're learning and what we are navigating in our own work is that actually the assignment of power should always serve the collective. And the best way to do that is for everybody to maintain their own power, because then they don't have to take power from anyone else. They don't have to give power to anyone else. They're empowered in and of themselves. And that's the best way to serve the collective, I think. And it's interesting because I think I think that's kind of what you were trying to navigate towards when in that bit that you were just talking about, where you're talking about your I guess your parents and how they might navigate a situation. I imagine that to an extent they feel quite powerless around that stuff that is coming forward now. Like, genderqueer is just one example of many, many different ways that society is shifting and changing, and that people are able to represent their own authenticity. And the freedom around that is changing. Right. And, that it's happened historically. Like if we look at the last century or so, it's happened in terms of sexual orientation. It's happened in terms of gender representation. It's happened in terms of race and interracial relationships and all of that good stuff. And, I think that the power now, we recognize that maintaining our own power and allowing each other to maintain their power, that is the way that we are able to not just claim our sovereignty, but stand really firmly in that and encourage those people around us to do the same. And I think that's the key, I think.
Encouraging other people to do the same is absolutely part of it, but I don't think you're able to do that until you're in a space of being comfortable with your own sovereignty, with being comfortable with knowing who you really are. And that's almost where some of the problems crop up, is when people sort of start on this journey of exploring what it is that they believe and what they think. And then it's kind of like we try and get people on the bandwagon really quickly, and it's like, well, this is where I'm going, so hey, come along. Not that that's necessarily wrong, but I think it's being really careful about what it is that you're fully understanding of where you believe you are, because certainly I've found in the last 12, 24 months, my views have shifted in quite some extreme ways, absolutely for the better. But that's not to say where they were before was wrong. It's just that now they feel more aligned with who I am and how I want to show up in the world, and the people that I want in my life and in my children's life, and all of that sort of stuff. I think that's what's really shifted. But it can be really easy to like come at people who perhaps aren't on the same path as you and feel really like a bit pissy with them if they're not going to listen to you or do what agree with what you think. So I think it's really important to remember that it's very much about our journey, and actually just by being able to stand in your own truth, by being able to be the one who puts their hand up and says, actually, this is what I think, not what you think, not what anyone else, this is what I think. It allows others to do the same, and it allows others to question their belief systems. It allows others to question what they've been told is true. And that allows them to claim their power. And that's what we want everybody to do. I don't think everybody has to all agree with the same thing, because that's just not real. Like we're all individuals. We've all had very different experiences. We all want to live slightly differently, and that's absolutely okay. Being different is good. Like, see different as bad. And as far as I'm concerned, different is great. Like, you learn so much more when other people are different to you. And if we can start to be more willing to have that as the narrative, that difference is good, how much easier would so many of the things that currently cause so much conflict and pain be? Because we're trying to get everyone to be on the same side. It's like, well, can we just agree to disagree? And like, I respect your opinion, you respect mine, and let's have a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit and get on with actually being good citizens to the planet and making things that actually really matter change, rather than getting caught up in the artificial bullshit, to be perfectly blunt.
But I think that like what you're describing, that's the ideal, right? Like that ability to share space and share ideas and come from a place of love and acceptance rather than a place of judgment. But ultimately, we do live in a world where fear and judgment are a massive part of not just who we are, but how we are, right? Like, and I think the understanding that actually, like, there will be times when you fear being wrong, you fear failure, you fear not being good enough, not being right, like whatever it is that shows up for you, or being judged or rejected, like being in those spaces. That's about the stories that we tell ourselves, right? Like those aren't necessarily based on evidence in the current circumstance. They're based on all the evidence that we've built up over time that tells us that actually when we go out there and we speak our truth, we're not accepted, or we fail, or whatever, we're not good enough, whatever it is that comes up for us. And so the first part really of being able to claim your sovereignty is about navigating those stories and about starting to seek out the evidence that supports them being different. Creating space where, and for you and I, a lot of the time that's having kind of deeply uncomfortable conversations between the two of us that allow us to unpack that stuff and navigate our own truth, knowing that the other person is just holding space for that process. Like, it's not, there's no judgment there. I don't get off and go, oh man, you should have heard what Ellie was saying. Like, what about that job, right?
Really?
Like, it's not. I mean,
would be fine if you
did. No, it's, but it's really important that we understand that we understand that actually we have a safe space that we can do that stuff. And and so, being able to challenge ourselves to go outside of our comfort zone. And I know that you hate that term, like it's not healthy.
Rename it one day.
Yeah. Well, for now we'll just call it the Ellie zone. But
no, because it's not what we want to be in.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think I think when we're trying to sort of navigate those fears and those judgments, being able to do that, like, and understand what our own beliefs are and where they come from, where they're rooted, and what belief would serve us, right? That's that whole self-mastery part of the process that we work with all the time, is when we can unpack, like, where does that judgment come from? If we're telling ourselves that, that we couldn't possibly be right and be loud, like that would just not happen. Like, where does that belief come from? And how do we, hey Julia, how do we, like, how do we bring that forward in a way that makes it possible to reframe? And so that self-mastery piece, I know you can speak to that all day.
I certainly can. It's actually quite nice hearing you talk to it.
I listen to you all the time.
You do, clearly.
Yeah, but in terms of that that self-mastery piece, like, what does that look like to be able to claim your sovereignty and to be able to stand in your power? How do we navigate that?
That's such a great question. And to be honest, you've covered a lot of it already. It is being able to go fully into who you are, like learn to know yourself properly without judgment. Like that is the number one thing. If you can actually just explore all of the things that you think and all of the things that you've thought were true without judgment, and just really tune in and check into how they feel for you as well. Like, we get really caught up in just, like, our brains are on the go all the time. Like, we have got thought after thought after thought after thought. Just being able to slow that down and feel where those thoughts are in the body is a great indicator for actually how they really resonate with you, because there will be some that just feel uncomfortable. Like, if they just don't feel very nice, but you don't know that unless you slow everything down and can be aware enough of what's going on in your body to actually know that. I think it's being really willing to let go of the beliefs that perhaps you've had for so long. And, I'm 42. I've had some beliefs for a really long time, and they feel really comfortable, and they feel like, that they're who I am. But actually, again, when you start to explore them and you start to dive into them and understand a little bit more about, you know, the history of them, you know, where have they come from? Are they inherited? Are they, you know, are they generational? Are they societal? Like what, like where have they come from? You're able to just like really uncover it. So that for me, self-mastery is that deep understanding of who we are. It's like knowing yourself fully on every level and not being ashamed of any of those elements, because shame means we shut it down. We do not want to talk about things that make us feel shameful, and actually those often are the things that need the most airtime. They are the ones that need to be spoken about, but finding a space to do that is really hard. So, you know, of the work we do is all about this process, and we work with women who, you know that they want to do this work. So I think finding a space where you can have those conversations, that you can really explore it all without there being any constraints or like you've got to show up in a certain way is really important. And that's something that I believe I do a lot better with you by my side. And I think as a team, I think we provide space for women who really want to do that, because we are two very different people who have been brought together to do this work. And I think that just creates like a much bigger container for people to explore what's going on for them. And I feel very privileged to be able to do the work with you by my side. The next phase after self-mastery, of course, so because I'm handing it straight over, is the healing. Like being able to, once we know everything about ourselves, once we're able to, you know, really, you know, say, yeah, this is my truth. This is what I stand for. Quite often there's a whole big pile of stuff we've got to get rid of. It's like, right, time to go to the op shop.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I think with that, that concept of self-mastery, right, is that we're not going to like everything. And we're not going to want to keep everything. But knowing who we are right now and who we are at our core and the difference between the two, that's where the healing work comes. Right. And you said, you know, that sometimes what we believe is inherited. I firmly believe that it also comes from like past lives, experiences that we've come to this lifetime with. You know, we talk about being a spiritual being, having a human experience. And actually, if we follow that belief system, if we subscribe to the belief that we are, you know, spiritual beings having a human experience, then we also believe that there have been previous incarnations for us, and that we have chosen to come to this incarnation or this human experience for a reason. Right. And there's this massive uprising at the moment of feminine energy, of expansiveness, of healing as a collective, that I firmly believe you and I chose to be here for, you know, and we have a job to do within that. But not all of that job is external. We've certainly got stuff to do for ourselves as well. Right. And so part of that is that healing work. It's being brave enough to examine who we are at a very, very deep level, at a spiritual level, beyond the humanness. Yes, there is a human aspect of it. And, you know, I think that you would say that you deal with the humanness and I deal with the spirituality, but actually you go well beyond the humanness in the work that you do. And you do navigate those areas that can be uncomfortable where, you know, we've come to this lifetime with a belief or we've inherited it from generations past. Being able to navigate that stuff and then do the work to heal our spiritual selves at the same time as healing our humanness. So working with energy and clearing out understanding that we carry energy in our bodies that isn't serving us. And it's rooted in how we believe and how we see the world and how we see ourselves in it. And so being able to do that work, and, you know, it is a layered process. And sometimes you'll do that work and then you'll find the same things pop up again, but at a much deeper level. And so you do the work again. And when we do that, when we clear out the stuff that we've identified doesn't belong with us, whether it's something we've created for ourselves or something we've received from someone else, when we clear out the energy around that, we create the space for that expansiveness. And that's the next part of the process, right? Is being able to expand into the version of ourselves that is the next level, if you want to call it that, or the next version. But ultimately, it's just the truer version of who we are than the one we are as we speak. And so every time we go through that process, we become a truer version of ourselves. We become a more accurate reflection of who we are at that spiritual core level, having stripped away the layers that don't serve us.
Yeah, it's a little bit like looking at a flower bed, isn't it? First of all, you have to identify what are the things that you want to keep and what are the things that you really don't want to. And then first of all, you get the big ones out, you get the big old thistles that are really obvious. And then you start to do the next level and you keep going until it's clear. And then you've got some space to think, actually, well, what do I want in here? What do I want this to look like? And you actually have the space to be able to, have much more creativity and co-create with the universe about how you want your life to look. And I think that's hugely empowering to do. And for a very long time, I don't think I realized how powerful it was to be able to do that, to be able to take the aligned action that was actually taking me to spaces and to show up as like unapologetically who I am. And don't get me wrong, that still feels really fucking uncomfortable sometimes.
I know.
Because I am still working through a whole load of, bits and pieces, which I will be for a long time. And once I work through these bits, there'll be the next layer and the next layer. And it's kind of exciting that you don't have to think about getting to the end. It's just a journey that you just keep on going. But being able to show up more and more true to who you are is just, it's what you see kids, that just like are happy to just say whatever comes to their mind. They're comfortable just sharing all of themselves. Sometimes when you're like, oh God, I can't believe you just said that in public. But they are just unapologetically who they are. And, through life, we hide things down and we, put them in, our big bag of shadow stuff that we think that nobody really wants to see. And we bury it deep and we create these layers and these masks upon masks upon masks of who we think we should be, of what's acceptable to everybody else. And actually, sometimes you just get to this point and you're like, shit, the acceptable face that everybody is seeing has got no reflection of who I actually am. And I need to do the work to try and find out who the hell is underneath all of this. And, someone who's been there, and I know you've been you've been on that journey, you've looked in the mirror and you've been like, shit, what I see isn't who I am. It's a big journey. It's a big, uncomfortable space, but man, is it rewarding when you're able to actually start to peel the layers back, and so much less exhausting because you don't have to keep who you're meant to be where.
So would you say, I mean, for me, like the expansion space is the space where I do the braver, bolder, bigger things. And I guess for me, that's something that I've probably only experienced when I've had a community or a comrade or a whatever you want to call it, supporting that action. Would that be true for you as well? Do you think that like the moments where you've really expanded, there's been someone prepared to stand in the fire with you and say, actually, like, I can't contribute meaningfully other than being here, but I'll be here?
I think there have been moments in my journey where I've done it on my own, but it has felt scary and lonely, and I have taken little teeny tiny steps rather than big leaps. Whereas when I've had support, when I've had, whether that's friends who have been discussing the same thing, who you've got that common goal, and that moment where you sort of broach a conversation which could go one of two ways. They could look at you as if you're completely mad, or they go, oh my God, finally somebody to share this stuff with. When you have that, or whether it's in a paid coaching program, which has also been the case for me, I've been able to take much bigger steps. I've been able to because I've had more confidence that the where I was going to land was firmer. And I think that's from knowing that the people around me are kind of, their energy's there, and it's kind of helping support me whilst I'm taking that leap. It's like, it's not so much into the unknown, because you're having, those thoughts and those beliefs and those ideas that, little sort of flickers and flames inside of you, you're sharing them, and someone's going, they're almost being, you're validating them yourself, but they're also being validated by people around you. And when you've got the right people around you, and if you want to hear our podcast all about how relationships shape who we are in the world, definitely, it's been literally the most listened to podcast we've done, so recommend having a listen to that. But when we do surround ourselves with the right people, then it does make that expansion process much, much quicker. Like, it's possible to make change. But I just wanted to go back to something else that you talked about with these layers and going through it. It's like, we do the work, we do the self-mastery, we know ourselves, we learn what it is that we stand for, all of that stuff. We do the healing, we get rid of our pile of rubbish that we've sort of got on the corner of our desk, and we get rid of that, and then we're able to choose something new to fill the space. But then we do it again, like you go a little bit deeper. And sometimes you'll go over exactly the same thing again, just on a slightly different level. Sometimes something completely new will have cropped up. You're like, shit, where were you hiding? And then you sort of go through that, and then you release it, and then you expand into it. And then you go back again. And like it's this sort of this circle that you just keep going around, and you just keep getting deeper and deeper, and sometimes you'll come back up a bit, and it won't be so deep, and it'll be a really superficial thing. You'll be like, hang on a minute, I'm sure I've done all my, I've done all this level, I'm on the deep stuff, I'm on the real core stuff. And it's like, no, this is what it is. And I think that's what I love about the work that you and I do, and the program that we have, that we've got incredible women working through already, is that we do it over and over again. Like, we provide space and opportunity to keep doing that, to keep growing that self-mastery, to keep knowing yourself, to understand yourself on different topics, different levels, different everything, but just keep going around it, because that practicing, that getting, doing it over and over again, repetition is the only way we make meaningful change that lasts. And in terms of being able to stand in your power, this process, the self-mastery, the healing, the expansion, the she process that we use, is without a doubt the way to be able to claim your power, claim your sovereignty, and stand up and be, unapologetically, awesomely, authentically you.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I really want to say about that particular thing is that there are layers, and we do, I know I've seen you have things crop up where you've done lots of work and you're like, oh, I thought I'd nailed that. And then something comes up, and sometimes it can feel really, really small, that the trigger for it. But the impact is really, really massive. And you're like, how did that even happen? And certainly I've had it too, where I've dealt with something and, really processed it and done the healing and all of that good stuff. And then found that, as I've gone through that process, I've gained confidence that I've dealt with it. And then something will pop up, like sometimes years later. And you're like, how did that even come up? Like, I don't understand it. But I think that we need to have a little bit of compassion for ourselves in those moments, and remember that we are humans. Like, and that will always have limitations around how we engage with the world, and how we engage with ourselves. And, I think, there's this sort of concept, and certainly something that I used to believe, was that, if someone was truly spiritually grounded and really connected with themselves, that they wouldn't have those little stumbles, and they wouldn't have those little hiccups, because, they know themselves, and they've come to accept who they are, and they've done the work. And, like, it's a linear process, but it's cyclic. It's so cyclic. And, we go through, and everything, we go through that process of self-mastery and healing and expansion, and we go through the cycle over and over again. But, we live cycles within cycles. So sometimes we go through years of going through that process with something, only to find that another cycle begins, and it goes another layer deeper. And then it goes another layer deeper in the next cycle. And, sometimes those cycles are 20 years long. And really, that's a very human thing, right? That we live a linear lifetime, but it's ruled by cycles.
Yeah.
And so we have to really have compassion for that, and say, actually, like, when that stuff comes up, it's the universe reminding us that we're human, and it's in the universe inviting us to reconnect with our spiritual selves on a much deeper level. And I just can't say enough, like, how much compassion and kindness and love we need to have for ourselves in those moments, because it can be really brutal. right? Like, I know you feel that. Like, when something comes up and you're like, I fucking dealt with this. I dealt with this already. I've done this. I've done this work.
Again?
I'm done. Yeah, right? And you're like, and so then you're like, did I not do it right? Did I not do enough? Like, right? And you instantly turn that on yourself and say, actually, like, it must be my fault. It couldn't possibly be the universe just reminding me that I'm human.
Yeah.
But actually, we just have to go into that compassionate state and say, actually, I am a human. And there will be stuff that comes up just to remind me of that.
Yeah.
And I can navigate those from a place of power, because I understand that I am human, and that I am having, I am a spiritual being, but I am having a human experience. And part of that is constantly navigating that process of, mastering who I am, understanding myself, and then, going through that healing process and accepting that sometimes who we think we are when we're 20 is not who we think we are at 40, and it won't be who we think we are at 60.
Yeah,
right?
I can definitely say, hand on heart, that the person I was at 20, 30, 41 and 42 and however many days.
But the thing is, like, every time that we think we know who we are, we're reminded by the universe that there's more work to be done. Right? And if that process stops, life's done. This human experience is done, because we're here to learn, we're here to grow. And if we stop that process, if we just say, no, I'm done, then what more can the universe do but ask us to start again?
I do think with that sometimes, though, that there are times when the work doesn't happen very quickly, and it might feel like you're standing still, because I've definitely had periods of time where I've started my journey and then I've stalled for 2 or 3 years and just haven't moved forward. So I think it's remembering that there's a balance in all of this. There's always work to be done, but sometimes actually the work that needs to be done is just existing. It is actually just getting through Monday to Friday, then dealing with Saturday and Sunday, and just getting on and having that compassion and kindness for wherever you are and whatever cycle. We could talk about this at length for much
we do all the time.
We do all the time. Honestly, if you wanted to be a fly on the wall, you would hear a lot more of this. We've just condensed it. But we're going to be doing lots of work next week all about the goddess mindset, and Erin's done some great little videos about what that actually means. For me, it's all about, if you are feeling uncomfortable with where you're at the moment, if you're feeling like you want to make some change, if you feel like you're feeling stuck, you just know that there's meant to be more, but you don't know what that is or how it looks like or even where to start, then really, like, tuning in and accessing the goddess mindset can help that. And next week is all about what that looks like, what it means, what it feels like. We've got some great tools. We've got some it's going to be really fun. It's going to be really light, but it's going to be life-changing. I can promise you that, because you get to listen to Erin and all her amazingness. So that in itself is pretty damn cool. So if you haven't signed up yet already, then link will be below in a comment. I'm looking at head of tech to sort that out.
It's already done.
Already done. She's already there. She's like, let's me do the talking, and she's just there, like, absolutely making everything work.
And we will obviously also be sharing inside of that week a little bit more about the program that we run and the work that we do, that's ongoing. And so if that's something that you're interested in hearing more about, tune in next week. But feel free to reach out in the meantime and, ask us about that stuff and what we do, because, like, you can probably tell, because we have many, many words every single week about the same sort of stuff. We're really super passionate about the fact that this work is necessary, and that we provide a space that you can do that work in. And we do our own work inside of that space as well. It's not something where we are necessarily, just there to serve. We're there to learn and grow and heal and all of that good stuff as well. But it is something that we truly believe we are here to serve women with that space, and to share what we know, and to share what we do, and to honor ourselves and the women around us. And so if that's something that you feel is missing from your life, or you feel would serve you or help you move forward in a meaningful way, reach out. We will always make time to talk to you, and we will always make space to to share time with you and talk to you about where you're at and where you would like to be. So please do reach out. But for now, I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it, and we're going to end this. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next week.
You will indeed. Bye.
Bye.